Come on. Over here, please. Yep. Good boy. Good boy. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Just to let you know, this is the second take. Take two. I filmed this yesterday, and when I went to edit it today, it was all recorded in slow-mo. I could not use it, so we're doing it again. This is going to be the better version. And today, unlike yesterday, we're actually joined by both our pets. Yesterday, she made an appearance, and then he made an appearance, and he was jumping all over the table. So we'll see if he can behave today. Today's video is a Q&A, highly requested by you, to answer some questions from our recent Europe trip. We went away for 5 and a bit weeks, just under 6 weeks.
11 countries.
And we visited 11 countries. How do you feel about that?
Exhausted. Need a holiday.
You know you've had a good holiday when you need another holiday to recover from your first one. So which countries did we visit, just as a preamble for everyone to catch up who may not have seen us?
Let's think about it. London, Wales.
That's a country. So it's
England. Okay.
Wales. Ireland and Scotland.
Scotland.
France.
Yep.
Switzerland, Germany, Italy.
Holland.
And what's that? Belgium.
Yep.
Belgium and Netherlands.
Netherlands and Malta.
And Malta. Yes, and Malta.
I think that's all 11, but yeah.
Anyway, those are 11. If someone can count them as we were saying, and perhaps let us know in the comments below, that will be great. So some of the questions, well, the majority of the questions are related to the bus tour that we did. It was essentially, well, we booked it as one tour, UK and a greater Europe or classic Europe with, what was it? Holiday Max. With Holiday Max. And we didn't realise until we started, it actually consists of 2 tours. So the first leg of the UK trip, we had a full coach with about 44 people. And then that started and ended in London. And then the second tour started and ended in London as well. But the following day. And that was the classic Europe tour. And there were about 8 people that continued that tour with us from the original group. And then the next group consisted of 24 people in total. Thereabouts. So about half the number of people completed the second part or went on to the second part, and 8 of those, plus us, were from the original tour. Okay.
Although we purchased it as one tour, we didn't know it was 2 separate tours at the time.
No. So, okay, so some of the questions... let's start with the questions that were related more to packing, I think it was. Let me find it. Okay, so I started off the tour with a weekender bag and a medium-size bag on wheels because our tour specifically stated that we had a maximum weight limit of 23 kilos to take with us. What happened? The first bag that I took with me that I bought online was really good, and it would be excellent as a weekender. But when I realized that we were traveling and staying overnight in different hotels, I found that I was putting that bag over my medium-sized suitcase and then pulling my medium-sized suitcase along with me. Well, on one of the hotels, there were about 5 or 6 steps on our floor, and I went down those steps with the suitcase behind me. It was my mistake, really. I was stupid. Holding on to the extended handle, and as the suitcase went down the steps, you can imagine the handle snapped because of the weight that was on it. And also, I probably shouldn't have, dragged the suitcase with the extended handle down the steps. So that was my mistake. So what I needed to do, because that was only day 4 into the holiday, was I needed to buy another suitcase because there was no way that I was able to then pull along the suitcase along all the different locations that we were going. We were walking on cobblestones. It was good because the luggage, all the places that we stayed at had elevators. So there wasn't a problem taking a suitcase up to our room, but there were a couple of hotels that had steps in between in those floors, and it would be easier to carry a suitcase that had wheels on it than to have to carry one over my shoulder, because then I was also carrying a big bag over my other shoulder. So it was just awkward. So I ended up buying a new suitcase and a bigger one, which is, I had one of those at home, but because of the weight restrictions, I thought, no, I'll take the medium-sized one. The bigger one was actually better because I was able to just spread out my clothes a little bit more easily, put my pillow in there because that's something that we brought with us. And it just made life easier. And then I bought a carry-on with wheels, which was the cheapest of the cheap that I could buy there because I've got them all at home. And so it wasn't the best quality, so it was actually awkward to pull, but it was better to pull that on wheels than to actually carry the original bag over my shoulder. So for someone who asked how good that carry bag, the original one was, it was really good, but I probably wouldn't take it overseas with me, especially if you've got another carry bag over your other arm. It just makes it really awkward. Carry one with wheels, carry on board with wheels, rather than that. That zip it up bag is great if you're traveling for a weekender or you're just taking that with you interstate for a weekend, because you can pack a heck of a lot of stuff in there and it weighs pretty much nothing. Whereas when you carry one of those carry-on board suitcases with wheels, you lose 2 kilos straight up front just by using that suitcase. Whereas the carry-on with the zip, that weighed nothing. So basically I had 7 kilos to take with me. And I ended up buying a Mickey Mouse suitcase, which was perfect because it was so easy to see on the bus to take on and take off. I immediately knew which one was mine. No one had a Mickey Mouse one. And also on a conveyor belt coming home and then at the airport, it was so easy to find it and locate it. Whereas, Kevin had the ones that we brought from home. And so many other people had a blue one. So it's easy to identify. So yes, I would recommend that bag, but more if you're just taking that with you rather than if you're taking a big suitcase, because it just makes it awkward. And it would perfectly work for a weekend away as a weekender. That was a long answer. And so what size suitcase, which is the next question, what size suitcase would you recommend? A lot of people starting off said to pack light and take a small suitcase.
Most people didn't. Most people packed a large suitcase.
Yeah, most people had a large suitcase, and where we were staying, it wasn't difficult.
Although a lot of the lobbies, you arrive to the hotel and immediately you've got steps. We found that quite often in hotels that you arrive at, which is not if they didn't have a ramp or area. Some did, but most didn't. You had to go up a few steps. So again, if you've got a really big bag, it was probably a little easier because you're not carrying multiple.
Exactly. Yeah. So one big bag versus multiple small bags makes it easier. Yes, Louis. What do you want to say? Hello. Okay. So then the next, a lot of people ask, would we take this trip again and would you recommend it? Let's leave that last because we have some strong opinions on that, don't we? Yeah. All right. So next one. How did we book our trip? I'll leave it up to Kevin because he's the one who booked it.
Well, we fell in love with a Netflix series called Outlander, and that was something that we loved watching, and we loved the scenery. Scotland and Ireland, that sort of was featured a lot in that series, was really beautiful and was somewhere we've never been.
Yeah.
And ironically, weeks later, days later, I can't recall exactly, but there was this advert on Facebook for this tour with a company called Holiday Max, which we'd never even heard of. And they were doing this Highlander tour. And it went through a lot of the areas that we were wanting to go. It also did other places like Europe that we'd already been, but it was, as we saw it, one package. And it was an early bird special for next year. We were coming up to our 30th wedding anniversary and we wanted to do a big trip because in 2020, which was our 25th anniversary, we were unable to travel, even though we were sort of starting to make plans, COVID lockdown that year, and even postponing it the following year, we were still in lockdown. So, it was really spur of the moment.
Yeah, and we looked at the comments, I think, under that ad. And I remember you saying, it's highly recommended. A lot of people had good experiences with it.
They advertised thousands of 5-star reviews, etc.
Yeah.
So we booked it.
Yeah. So next question is what company you travelled with? And it was Holiday Max. Yeah. And was Holiday Max easy to deal with before the trip?
Yeah, I think the booking process was actually really simple. We contacted them, they went through it in a little bit of detail with us, and then we had to send them off a deposit. And I think that balance had to be due with
14 days later.
14 days,
yeah. Which was about a good 9 months before our trip actually started. So it was they got the money up front very quickly. What was covered in your tour price? Majority of your dinners, breakfast, etc. The additional optional experiences that you could book, did you know in advance or were you given the details on the tour?
Yeah, we thought most was included.
Yeah.
The way it's promoted, it's probably a little vague, especially for someone who's never travelled this way before on a bus tour. But there are a lot of optional extras you have to still pay above the price of the tour. Those prices are not disclosed at the time you actually book the tour. There was a couple that I spoke with from Sydney that had requested, because they've done tours like this before, had requested the cost of the optional extras. And they were a bit disappointed that by the time the trip came up for them, which might have been similar time like us the following year, the prices of the optional extras had doubled, which they found really quite shocking, because by the time you add it up for each person, you're talking thousands of dollars extra to do some of these optionals. And if you don't do the optionals on some of those days, you really haven't got a lot to do. Some of the areas that they drop you off, if you don't do it, there's really not much to see. So you have to kind of do the optionals. You've got to factor that in on top of the price if you're going to do a tour like this.
Yeah. Majority of the breakfasts were included. Not all, but majority. The dinners, there's a few dinners included. So, for example, the first night in London, the dinner's included at a pub, which was lovely. The funny thing that we saw about pubs in London is that, unlike in Australia, people actually congregate outside the pub to drink. So you go in, order your drink, grab it at the bar, and then walk outside, and you stand around outside the pub on the street.
I don't know if that's just because it was good weather. I wonder what they would do when it's raining.
Yeah, true. Well, I suppose they wouldn't. They wouldn't.
So maybe that's just because it's such beautiful weather they want to be outside. But it seemed like there were more people at the pub than what the pub could fit if everyone was inside.
Yeah.
Outside. But still, inside was pretty full.
Yeah.
But it was common amongst London, around all the pubs, people were outside drinking.
Yeah.
Not part of like a seated area, literally just outside the pub.
Yeah. And it just gave it a feeling, an atmosphere that we hadn't seen before. So that was really good.
Some of the pubs even had like little ledges.
Outside.
So you could put your beer and put your drink there and talk.
Yeah. And that first dinner, I think, was fish and chips.
Yep.
With mushy peas.
Yep.
Mushy peas?
Yep.
Mushy peas. Yeah. So that was really good because it was different. And then some of the other dinners, they were also included, but they were quite basic dinners. Yeah. So, for example, there was a German dinner that I recall that was included, and the meal options for that were sausages as one option, ravioli or chicken for the third option. And when we travel, we like to try the cuisine of the location. So we ordered the sausages, and I have to say...
Well, I think it was true to its name because they were the worst sausages. The German bratwurst sausages, but they are the worst sausages.
They were bland and the casing was really rubbery. So, I don't know. I didn't enjoy those. But that's not to say that all German sausages aren't nice.
What we had
weren't the best selection to have. So,
and we've got a German friend who also said that boiled German sausages are not really that popular.
Yeah, so I don't know. Anyway, we got those. So that was good. Also, the breakfasts were actually quite good. In fact, as we realised how expensive everything is overseas, for example, you go out for breakfast and you might get scrambled eggs on toast, and that might cost you in Australia $15, right? In England, that's £15. they don't adjust because of the exchange rate. It's £15. So when you convert that to Australian dollars, you're talking over $30 for scrambled eggs on toast. And that was the same across the board all over Europe. You'd go out and get a coffee and, you'd pay $4.50 here in Australia. Over there, it's £4.50, €4.50. And it's like, how can it be? Because that's double for us. Like the euro was just under double, and the pound was well and truly 2.5 times, almost 2.25 times over. So, £5 is like, I don't know, $15 or something. So it adds up. So what we're starting to do for breakfast is we'd sort of make some extra breakfast rolls and take them along with us. Most of the locations had bread rolls and cold cuts, cold meats and cheese. And so we started making those and taking them along for us so that when we were stopping along the way.
Because the stops along the way were really petrol station stops. We weren't really stopping anywhere that the food was anything too great. There was one stop which was really fantastic.
That was the first day.
That was the first day. It was like a market sort of thing that they promoted. It was like beautiful desserts and patisserie and ice creams, gelato, all this stuff. We were like,
nice wines, nice cakes.
I thought this is what we were going to see throughout the tour.
And that was the first day. So we're like, I won't buy it here. I'll buy it at the end.
Yeah, it was the only petrol station we stopped at. It was like that. Most of the others had your typical KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Couple of them we stopped at. I think in Italy you could buy like an Italian roll. And,
chapters and things like that.
But even those types of places were few and far between. Most places was just literally a toilet stop and somewhere to get something quick to eat. So having freshly made rolls actually gave us something that was probably nicer than fast food that we would have bought otherwise.
And also, just for anyone who's never travelled abroad or in Europe, or especially, where was it? In North Europe and maybe Italy as well, where we had to pay to use the toilets.
Well, they actually, interestingly, have little gate systems.
Yeah.
So you can't get in. You either have to pay by credit card or coin.
Yeah.
And then the gate opens up to allow one person through. And it's about
€1 or £1.
So the equivalent of about $2 Australian.
Yeah, to go use the toilets. Mind you, they were clean, at least, because of that. So, yeah, but that was something that we hadn't realised about it. Someone had told me that we had to carry our own toilet paper for Europe and Italy. Didn't need to everywhere we went because, we were stopping at petrol station. Excuse me, Louis, I don't think our viewers want to see you licking your butt. Come here. So we didn't need to use bring toilet paper with us. So that might have been because of where we were stopping, but that wasn't something that we needed. Okay, we flew with Cathay Pacific, and the viewer knew that, so she's asked, how was Cathay Pacific? Was it good?
Yeah, well, look, I think it was pretty good. I mean, from what I've read, I think they're in the top 5 best airlines in the world, so, it is a premium airline. It was comfortable. Yeah. Meals were okay.
Yeah, we got 2 meals and a snack. Now, the first leg was Melbourne, Hong Kong, and then the second leg was Hong Kong, London, and in both legs we got 2 meals and a snack. And alcohol as you wanted, and soft drinks as you wanted. So it was really good.
Yeah. And I think they had a little snack bar as well. If you wanted stuff, you could go up and help yourself.
Yeah, during the night, or when you're travelling at night and they turn all the lights out, there were snacks in that little centre area.
With the toilet.
So they were good. What were the hotels like? Were they chains like Holiday Inn, Best Westerns, or Premier Inns?
Yeah, there were a lot of variety of hotels that we stayed at.
So, sorry, just to preamble that. So the tour, the company promoted that you would stay in a premium
4-star hotel
in London. And
as you spend 5 nights in London, 2 with the day you arrive, the day you arrive back from the England tour.
Yep.
And then at the end of the tour.
Yeah.
And then the 3 nights when you first arrived.
Well, that depended on us. Yeah, but that depended on us because we arrived earlier.
Right. When you look at the advertisement.
Oh, really?
It's 5 nights in London. and it's 5 nights in a premium 5-star. And neither hotel we stayed in were, a 4-star hotel.
Yeah.
Neither of them were a 4-star.
Yeah. So because of the big group that we were, we actually found out once the tour started that the group was split up across 3 different hotels. One of the hotels was the Tower Hotel, and that was a 4-star hotel.
A nice hotel with a beautiful view. So a lot of the people who were on the tour sent us pictures in our Facebook group, and from their bedroom, they could see literally the tower.
London Tower.
And we were at a place called the Kensington Gardens. Location-wise,
It was beautiful. Across the road from the Kensington Gardens,
Yeah.
and it was close to restaurants.
Yeah. But it was only a 2-star hotel.
Yeah.
Yet it was promoted as a 4-star premium hotel. Even the Ibis, which they put us up in for those last 2 nights, that's not a 4-star hotel. So
and it was in the middle of nowhere. It was near Dockland.
Yeah,
Docks,
Dockland area, but
which is there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So and then along the way, and that, mind you, that was even at the 2-star hotels that we were staying at in Kensington Gardens. That was even better than the hotel that they put us up in Venice. Now picture this: I was reading the itinerary, thinking, oh, it's going to be so good. We're going to be in Venice. We're going to be looking at the window, possibly, looking at the lagoon, at the gondolas. We're going to be smack in the middle of Venice. We arrive. Once we get the itinerary, it says that the hotel is actually in Mestre, which is Venice, like saying Dandenong is in Melbourne. No?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, we were half an hour away.
Half an hour away, but it's not
by
Venice.
Public transport.
By public transport. It wasn't Venice, the city of Venice. It was Venice, the what would you call it?
They call it the Venice region.
The Venice region. It's a bit like saying...
The promoting on the advertisement was Venice Hotel. So
yeah, it wasn't a Venice hotel. It was a
it didn't say
Mestre.
Venice region. It said Venice Hotel.
Yeah, it's like saying Melbourne and thinking you're going to be staying in Melbourne CBD and ending up staying Melbourne Dandenong.
Yeah.
Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's not the same. So, but that wasn't, the worst thing. The worst thing about that hotel was that it was actually, they've got to add...
We got a bonus S in that hotel. Normally when you've got an S on top of something, it's like super special. Sometimes when, the S appears, but the S appeared in the word hotel, which I think was called hostel.
Yes.
Which we were a bit shocked by, that we were staying in a hostel, but we didn't get the itinerary until a week before we left, even though we asked multiple times for it. That was consistent with everyone else's views, that was a bit disappointing that they leave it till the last minute to let you know where you're staying and what you're doing. Even the itinerary as to day by day what we did, we only got that a week before we went, considering we paid them
9 months earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the flights get booked immediately because we got those confirmed pretty much within the month once we decided on the dates, and we told them that we want to add an extra 5 days in Malta. They immediately booked those flights for us. So we knew the starting and ending date, but apart from that, we didn't know anything else. So in Venice, we stayed in Mestre in a hostel, but we had the hotel room. So our hotel room at the hostel was a tiny, dirty bedroom. Grubby. The walls were grubby. The bathrooms were grubby. The sheets were grubby. And it just wasn't pleasant. It wasn't what we were expecting.
The tour is promoted as a luxury experience. I would not call some of the hotels we stayed in at all as luxury. Very basic, I would probably promote it as tour in regards to its accommodation, and even some of the meals. Like when we did have an included meal, you had maybe 1 or 2 options you could choose from off a set menu that they gave us. And because we're on a tour, everything moves fast. The one thing I would certainly say about doing a tour like this is if you're going to do it, you've got to be prepared to understand you're going to keep moving really quickly. You get up early, you're meeting for breakfast at 6:30 or 7 in the morning with everyone, and you've got maybe 30, 40 minutes for breakfast, and then you've got to be on the bus and packed up and off we go to the next destination. And then you arrive back to your hotel probably around 7 o'clock the following night, and you'll have your dinner. And if we do have dinner as a group together, they literally bring your entree out almost immediately after you sit down, and you literally finish your entree and they're bringing you your main. And if there was dessert, you literally they're grabbing your plate from your main and they're bringing you your dessert. All of this, I think, is designed to keep the tour moving because you only have a certain amount of time.
But it's also got to do with the driver hours.
Because there's only one driver.
Yeah, there's only one driver that drives you around, and he can only work, I think, maybe a 12-hour day.
I don't even think it was that.
Yeah.
In some cases.
And in between, he needs to have a toilet break after an hour and a half of starting, an hour and a half break middle of the day, and then 2 hours later, another toilet break, etc., etc. And it needs to be done by a certain time at night. So that limits how much time you have available for the tour. So, and to talk about the hotels, some were chains, and look, the majority were clean and sufficient.
Very tiny. And
tiny
a lot
rooms,
of them are so small that when you consider a large size suitcase, there's nowhere to open it other than the bed.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere in your room to really leave it open without tripping over it because there's no space to put something like that. So
but even my medium-sized suitcase, we have to fold it up. We have to
so
open
you
it on the
take
bed.
what you need, reclose the suitcase, and stand it back up out of the way. So they were really, really small rooms.
Yeah. And that was across the board. And most of the time, we were staying like Whoopal from the city or from our location. A good half hour to an hour away.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the middle of nowhere where
literally
there was nothing to do. All you could do was have dinner at the hotel because there were no other options. So that was, wasn't what we were expecting. Were there any issues with the tour or the hotels?
I don't know where we'd start.
Okay, so I think we've explained about the hotels. The tour ran on time. The first tour was conducted by a very efficient...
You have a tour leader.
A tour leader and a coach driver. And the first tour leader was beautiful. She was an Australian from Adelaide, ex-school teacher, so she was very organised. And she would prepare your day sheets 3 days in advance, and they would state where you were staying each night, what time you were expected to get up and have breakfast, what time to get on the bus, what the excursions were each day, what time they were going to be, what time you were going to be at the next hotel, what the next hotel was, 3 days in advance. And every day she would tag places where you could go. So we would stop somewhere and she'd say, okay, well, this bakery is really nice. It's got clean toilets. That restaurant is really nice, but it's probably expensive, but it gives you good views, etc., etc. I would recommend this tour. We don't have enough time to do that tour, unfortunately, but, you can walk around. So she was very knowledgeable.
She'd done the tour a number of times.
She had done it a number of times. The second tour, the Europe tour, the original tour leader unfortunately cancelled for personal reasons, and so Holiday Max had to find a substitute, and they were able to find a lovely gentleman, local from Italy, from Venice in fact, but he had just come off a tour and actually hadn't had a break. So he went one tour and then us, and he was exhausted. And his skills in presenting the information were probably not on a par with the original tour leader. His were very basic. Get up at 6, breakfast, 7 o'clock bus, and where next destination is going to be this hotel. Following morning, get up, breakfast, next destination is going to be that hotel. That was it. It was very basic. So we had a bit of a shock between the two leaders.
He really didn't give you any information about what was going to happen during the day. He really just gave us the start-stop information.
Yeah.
What time we would need to be at the bus and breakfast, and what time we would need to be at dinner. And
I mean, he was very creative. He used to make up these stories to give us some history about the places that we were going to. But pretty much half an hour before our destination, that's when he would give us the information of what we were going to do. So
the worst part, look, I think the thing about the tour that is disappointing is that you are very limited on time. And so, Louis, you've got a set amount of time that they allow for your experiences, which are the sightseeing parts. And you've got to have these hour and a half breaks for them to stop for their lunch breaks, etc., the bus driver. If the bus driver gets a little lost or disorientated, which happened several times, they've got to, get back onto the correct road, they've taken the wrong turn, etc. Let's say that loses us half an hour or more in them making that mistake. That means that the penalty is that as the tourists, we lose some of our day on what we would have done in sightseeing. It's not like we'll arrive at our hotel half an hour later to compensate for it. They just shrink down the day, and instead of maybe having a 2-hour spot in Venice where we could have spent some time, that shortens down to maybe an hour and a half. That happened several times, including the very first day we all met as a group. Our bus driver got completely lost in London.
He didn't realise, he hadn't been to the Tower Hotel before and didn't realise that the turn off was before the bridge. And so we ended up going on that bridge multiple times, and London traffic is atrocious.
And for us to try and find somewhere to do a U-turn and turn back around, we ended up arriving 2 hours later than what we were supposed to. There were certain things we were supposed to do that day on that tour that just got shortened down or cancelled, that we were unable to do.
What happened was, in order to compensate for it, they asked us, because we've lost so much time up for it, and they don't put it that way, but basically because we'd lost so much time in getting to pick up the last group, basically our day would still have to end at 7. So, and that was the day that we were having the free dinner at the pub. So they suggested, instead of all of us catching the coach back to the 3 hotels and get dropped off at the 3 hotels, how about we just leave you at the pub and then you make your own way home. That way the coach can just leave.
Which also meant at your own cost. So
we had to buy tickets for the...
Which technically should have been included as part of our deal. But there was a market and a tour we were supposed to do with that. We were supposed to have time there. That got trimmed down to a ridiculous amount of time.
We just got the tour. And then we had maybe 15 minutes at the market. That was a beautiful market. I can't remember what it was called. Oh, Louis, come here. It was a beautiful market. I would have loved to have filmed there more, but it was pretty much 15 minutes and out. And we missed out on seeing that. So that's...
And that happened throughout the trip. So there were a number of days where things were cut short.
Yeah.
Or a tour, not even... I think it was a castle we were meant to go to in Cardiff.
Yeah.
And we actually ended up doing nothing in Cardiff other than arriving in Cardiff and having dinner at the hotel and going to bed. We went out on our own because Cardiff was actually in the city.
Yeah.
So we went for a bit of a walk around the town ourselves, but the tour of the castle didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen. We lost out there. And the hotels, look, they were all basic hotels. It wasn't a flash hotel that we stayed at anywhere. But in Italy, they don't provide you with ironing boards and iron. It's against the law. It's actually illegal to have them because of, I guess, a lot of the places are in historic locations. Anyway, for whatever reason, it's law. They don't provide irons and ironing boards. So you have to make do. And luckily, I'll add to that later when they ask something else. Luckily, I brought a steamer with me, and that came in so handy because that worked everywhere and we didn't have to use the iron. So some of those things you don't realise unless you've travelled before and had to use the iron, that some of those places don't have an iron. You can't assume. Someone asked me, did I bring my hairdryer? And no, I didn't. If you're particularly fussy about what hairdryer you use, then definitely bring it along, because some hotels have those tiny portable hairdryers that are pretty much hand dryers. They're very weak. So, in some of those cases, then, if you're particularly concerned, bring your own. And I'm so glad that a viewer recommended to me the steamer because that was the best purchase I made. It meant that we would steam our clothes the day, iron and steam them the night before, and we were ready to go the following day. And did you have access to laundry facilities wherever you needed it? No.
The only opportunity you had, if you were willing to pay the prices that the hotels charge for cleaning laundry, In some places, to get a shirt washed, just one shirt was about €20. So, we spent $40 Australian. You can almost buy a shirt for the same price as what you're getting it cleaned for, which was a bit ridiculous. I mean, we didn't do it. Some people did. We didn't think it was worthwhile to spend those sort of money. There was no laundries in any place. We even tried Googling when we were at the hotels, and there were some service stations that did have laundry facilities. We weren't at any of the stops long enough to do that. And unfortunately, we at the hotels we were staying at were nowhere near. You might have to go 5 Ks to get to a laundrette.
Well, the last hotel in London that we stayed at, our tour leader said there was a laundrette and she was doing her washing. But it was like 17 minutes walk from the hotel.
That close.
It wasn't that close. So how we handled, excuse me, don't bite me, how we handled our laundry was that any time we were staying in a hotel 2 nights, the first night we would do some washing and it would dry, over that period. And if it didn't, we would use the hairdryer to dry off our socks, underwear, etc. And in most hotels, it worked perfectly fine. But in some hotels in Europe, I may or may not have set off the fire alarm inadvertently. I was using a hairdryer to dry the socks, and I think it must have been somewhere that was really cold because it steamed up the room. And I didn't think that the steam would act the same as smoke. So, it just steams up the room. I had the window open, so that was fine. I got a call from reception saying, is everything okay in your room? I said, yeah, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. Thank you for checking. I thought that was weird that they're checking. 2 minutes later, so I go back to drying my socks with a hairdryer. 2 minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and it's the maintenance manager coming in saying, excuse me, is everything okay in your room? We've had a call that there's an issue with your smoke detector. Is there a fire? And I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm just drying my socks with the hairdryer, and it seems to be, steaming the room, but that's it. So he says, okay, well, just be careful. Maybe do it next to the window so it helps ventilate. I said, no problem, I'll do that. Go back to steaming my socks. I get a call from reception saying, excuse me, mate, you're actually setting off the fire alarm, not the fire alarm internally, but it's actually contacting the fire department that there's an issue at our hotel and a potential fire. Can you please stop doing what you're doing? So I had to stop. So I thought, that's odd. What a weird hotel to have that kind of setup. Very sensitive smoke detectors. Didn't think anything of it. Next time we were in a hotel that had 2 nights again, we were the last morning and our socks hadn't dried. So out with a hairdryer I come. 2 minutes in, the fire alarm actually rings throughout the hotel.
At about 5 in the morning.
5:30.
Still 5.
And of course, we told everyone the story of the previous hotel. So when I got on the bus, everyone said to me, did you set off the smoke detector again drying your socks, Deborah? And I was like, yeah, sorry, that was me.
Yeah, so what's the moral of the story?
Don't use hairdryers to dry your socks in hotels in Europe.
Or if you do open the window, it'll be near a window.
Well, I was doing that and it still set them off. I don't know. I was having issues. He wasn't having issues. So maybe because I had it on full heat and maybe you didn't. So maybe that's the moral of the story. Take away from it. Use a low setting because otherwise, you'll set off the smoke detector and don't complain. Luckily, no one charged us, financial consequences for it, but it was just interesting to learn. Well, you met at the airport and taken to your first hotel in London, as well as being taken back from the last hotel to the airport.
Yeah, so we were. It includes transfers, which are supposed to be a limousine transfer, which
is lovely, yeah.
More like a high-end BMW or something like that. I think we got picked up in. And that was lovely. But because we modified the trip, so we wanted to go to Malta at the conclusion. So when we returned back to London, we then flew the following day to Malta to spend some time with my relatives and do a bit of sightseeing. With that modification, we instantly lost our return transfer. Even if we were staying at the same hotel that we were staying when we were given it, the minute you make any modification to your trip, they take that away. They don't financially reimburse you for it. It's just they allow you to make the adjustment. So they allowed us to pick a flight a week later to return back from London than the prescribed flight. But yeah, that's something you do lose.
Yeah, so you lose that with no compensation. How did the tour work? As in, when you arrived into a city, did they give you a walk through the city telling information about the place, and then you had your own time for an hour or how many hours, and then you had a meeting point, etc.?
Yeah, it's a combination of all those.
Combination. Depends on how much time you had. So say, for example, the first day the first start day of the tour in London, we got a tour included, and it was the Jack the Ripper? No, it was the West End tour. The Jack the Ripper we did in our own time.
Yeah.
You got a tour of the West End where there was a lot of East End where there was a lot of graffiti, a special market, and that was included in the tour. But you had to tip the actual tour guide that wasn't our tour leader. That was included, and then in some places the tour leader would provide a tour for you that was free of charge, and that she would walk you through the main sections of the city.
The challenge with that is that you've got people, we were probably some of the youngest in the tour, and we're in our 50s. There were people in their 70s, 80s that were on the tour, some that had a little bit more mobility issues, so walking at a faster pace was harder. So when they do a group tour of showing you something sightseeing, it's quite difficult when you've got 40 people, 50 people, all walking at different paces. So,
and you can't please everyone.
They do give you the option to say, if you want, you can follow us.
Yeah.
If you can't, or you want to do something at your own pace, meet back at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can do your own thing.
And we did that a lot of the times, depending on the amount of time that we had available. Also tell information about places, and then you had your own time. Yeah, so that was like that.
She's
started with her eyes open. The first day, we found the first full day of actually getting picked up at the hotel and then heading off to our first location. We went via Bath, which is an absolutely beautiful location. And we only ended up having there maybe 2 hours in Bath, and we didn't get time to do everything that we wanted to do. So one of the last days that we had in London, we ended up taking the train to Bath and spend a whole day there, and that was lovely. We would have loved to have been able to do that with a lot of other places, but we didn't have enough time. But what I was trying to get to is that we have so many stories like this that we can fill you in on. So if you'd like us to have a little chat about what we did on the tour and what we liked and what we would have done differently and what places would go back to, let us know in the comments below, and Kevin and I will be happy to do that, because there's so much more that we could share that I think we can't share now because this has just gone quite a while yet. So we'll leave it to the questions that you asked, but if you'd like to know more, then let us know in the comments, and we're quite happy to share that. Now, the final questions that was highly asked: would you recommend the tour company, and would you do this tour again? So let's start with, would we recommend the tour company?
No. And what's your answer?
Look, I don't know any different, because this is the first tour of this kind that we've done. But I personally wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend Holiday Max, because it's not who you actually end up getting as the company that takes you on a tour. So you book with Holiday Max, and they subcontract it out to Expat, which is a different company that runs it. So we had issues with the coaches. The first coach in England was a luxury coach, brand new. It was a Mercedes 2025 coach, so everything was working. The second bus, unfortunately, was not of the same standard. it was a very old coach, and that was because the original coach we were supposed to have apparently needed to be serviced or broke down. And so we got the stand-in coach, which was an old coach. 5 days into the trip, the air conditioning broke down and they couldn't get it repaired. So it was leaking all down one side.
Literally like someone was pouring water over the vents and dripping down in some cases. To the point the seats were getting completely drenched and soaked.
Yeah. So people would sit on the left-hand side of the coach, not the right-hand side of the coach, because some seats would just get drenched. So
And luckily that was the smaller tour
Yeah.
as far as people. I think we had 40 plus on the first.
yeah, it was only 24 on
tour.
the next one.
So we had the room, but the downside was we're in Europe, it's 30 plus degrees, and in some cases it was hotter on the bus than what it was when we got off the bus because they couldn't run the air conditioning.
Yeah. Because if they ran the air conditioning,
It
it would drip.
Yeah.
So I was managing that,
Yeah.
cooling down the bus enough, and then, turning it off so that we wouldn't lose all that water.
Look,
So-
my reason for why I wouldn't recommend Holiday Max, I'm happy to pay a company what they're advertising and expect to get what they promote they're going to give you. When, for example, they promote you get to stay in a 4-star hotel and you stay in a 2-star hotel, then I didn't get what they said they were going to provide us. And there's no compensation financially back to you because they booked you somewhere cheaper. If they have a sheet that says on this day you're going to get breakfast and you're not going to make it back to your hotel in time or whatever it was so we could get that, or dinner, you missed out and there was no compensation. There was a lot of these sorts of things that happened along the way, and I feel that either it's poorly managed in that regard or no real regard for the people who've paid. You get what you get, and that shouldn't be the way when it's specifically promoted. I had a laugh when I came back and I read the brochure and they talk about these luxury coaches with toilet amenities on board and everything else. But
On the first day, you get told,
warned
on the
they
coach,
are not to be used.
we have toilets on board, but they are not to be used apart from emergencies because someone has to go and clean them at the end of the day. And it's, not fair for them to have to pick up number twos out of these toilets.
Which
So
is fair
only
enough,
an
but then
emergency.
it's inconsistent with their marketing. It doesn't say in their marketing we have toilets on board for emergency only. So It makes it sound like you've got full use of everything that's there. That's just an example of the sorts of things.
Another thing that I found really interesting, when you get into an Uber and they have water and it's free of charge, well, on these coaches they have water, but every bottle was €1 or £1.
Yeah.
So you have to pay for that. And that money goes to the coach driver. It's his
Little
pocket money that he gets. Yeah.
Yeah, which is quite interesting, because I think our daughter at the moment is doing a Kentucky. They provide water for the passengers, which, look, they just literally had the Costco water that they bought.
That's what it is.
So they were making a small little profit on it, but their thinking and rationale is, well, it's still cheaper than what you would go and pay
Exactly.
at a stop.
Yeah.
And we're providing it here for you. And they had on-board chillers, so, you could have it also cold, etc. I don't have a massive problem with that, but
Just something to be aware of.
for a luxury experience that is promoted as, you would think that on board that they would have maybe something like
A bottle of water a day per person type of thing, and then anything extra you have to pay £1 or €1. That would have felt reasonable. But anyway, that's just something that's sort of, to consider when you're doing it. Also, again, I don't know how other our tour companies work, but for us not to have been told our itinerary until a week before departure seems unreasonable, because they book last minute. Literally, I felt like the accommodation that we were staying in some places was booked on lastminute.com. When we went to Europe 19 years ago, I actually booked the whole trip and we were using public transport, jumping on trains. We went from London to Paris, through Italy, using public transport, trains. And I booked on a website that was a luxury accommodation, but you wouldn't know until you actually booked it. And so we were staying at 5-star hotels, but they would be, an hour away from town. And I accepted that because, I was getting the benefit of a 5-star accommodation, but it was a little bit out of the way. Here, we were getting substandard accommodation.
I would say
away from
3-star at best.
3-star, but outside of the location. So we lost out both ways because it meant that by the time we got to the hotel at 7 o'clock, because the driver had to stop, it was too late. You were exhausted to get back on a bus or a train to head back out again for another, 45-minute trip into town to then have dinner out, for example, or just go sightseeing, to then come back to your hotel at your own expense, which would have made it late at night, and then you would have to start early again the following morning. So it wasn't feasible for us to do that. Another thing was according to the itinerary, we were going to stay in Cologne. Cologne is a beautiful town. Did we actually see Cologne?
No, we were in literally a fairly new, I would say, couple-of-year-old hotel that was built in an area that they planned to obviously subdivide and do other things with, but it was just fields around us. Looked like they were growing some types of vegetables, etc. But there was nothing you could see other than a train line and paddocks. There was no restaurants anywhere near the hotel, so you really only had the option of eating in the hotel, which had a restaurant, luckily. But yeah, a lot of the places like that, we were in the middle of nowhere.
So you don't actually get to see it. They promote that you're going to be in Cologne. You don't see anything of Cologne. You see the freeway outside of Cologne, and you stay outside of Cologne.
And we didn't even drive through the town of Cologne.
No, we didn't.
So they could show us Cologne. We saw none of it.
Yeah. So would we do this? Would we recommend the tour company? No, we wouldn't.
I don't feel they delivered what we paid for.
Yeah.
And that's why I give it that rating.
Yeah.
I think overall we got to see a lot of lovely places. I wish we had more time in some of these places. I don't know if that's consistent with what other people have experienced when they've done these sorts of tours. But the penalty of the driver making a mistake and turning in the wrong direction and then having to recorrect, I can understand people make mistakes and people get lost, etc. The penalty falls back on the tourist.
Yeah.
We missed out on that time then for them to recorrect. And you're paying money to a tour company that should be experienced, that should be able to get you to those locations and should know where they're going.
Yeah. Look, we accept that sometimes it's outside their control. Having a coach that unfortunately breaks down and you don't have a backup, I understand that. But surely they've got a backup. They've got a maintenance system where they actually, have newer coaches. If you're promoting a luxury coach and your backup is not luxury, well, then there's something wrong. If you're promoting that you're going to be staying in a city, then you should be staying in that city. I mean, even, we went to Cardiff in Wales. We were staying in that city, but we didn't get a chance to see anything in that city. Like Kevin
actually made no sense. We drove all the way from Liverpool to Cardiff.
From Liverpool.
It was the other way around. That's
from Bath to Cardiff.
Yeah.
And then from Cardiff to Liverpool the following day.
And we spent a lot of time in the coach to get to Cardiff, thinking we were going to a destination to see something else.
It wasn't.
And it was hours to get to Cardiff from Bath just to sleep there.
Yeah.
We could have stayed at any other motel we passed along the way.
And
I think that got us to another country because Cardiff's in Wales.
So then they could tick off, there you go, you see Wales. So, it's an extra country. But it just felt like it was a worthless amount of wasted time. Another thing that I found disappointing was that some of the hotels, you would think that they would know whether the coach has got parking facility in front of it. We went to a couple of hotels, one particular in Italy, where the coach could not park outside the hotel because it was school drop-off or something, or there was something wrong.
There certainly was no coach parking.
There was no coach parking, and even to pick up the following morning, we weren't picked up outside the hotel. We had to be dropped off 2 blocks away from the hotel and carry our luggage across, Italian cobblestone paths,
broken footpaths,
to get to our hotel.
Yeah. And it's not that easy.
No, it's not that easy.
And for some of the people who were in their 70s, 80s, etc., that was a bit of a battle for them. So the one thing I will say, after you travel as a group, you kind of become friends and help each other out. So if you see someone struggling and someone else can give them a hand, like one of the hotels we stayed at had no lifts, so I started helping people carry their bags up the stairs, and that's nice. That, everyone kind of does help each other out, but yeah, it's difficult when, like, even when you arrive at certain hotels to get in and check in. Sometimes
there's another bus
happen around the same time.
Yeah, there's another bus that arrives, and then the cheeky buggers, what they do is they let the tour leader jump out, before, even though we arrived first, their tour leader jumps out of their coach and runs ahead of our tour leader, even though we're parked first and we should be checking first. And that tour leader goes and checks in first, and we don't arrive first, and we have to wait for them to check in, and then they're already using the lift. Yeah. And sometimes there's only one lift.
Or if they had two lifts, it was consistent that one lift was broken. Yeah. We had that at so many different hotels.
Yeah, so what we did to help out people was, we would put the luggage in the lift.
Work out who's, say, on level 2.
On the same floor. And then we would press the 2 button and we'd run up the stairs and take out the luggage. So rather than have one couple with their suitcases go up at a time, we sort of maximise the suitcase, and then people would go up by the stairs. You make it work. Yeah. But it's not what we were expecting. I heard from some of you that said that your luggage was actually taken to your room. Like, I'm not with Holiday Max. Yeah. So I guess, you know where we're going. Would we take this kind of tour again?
I don't think I would. Maybe not at this age. Yeah. Maybe when I'm a lot older and not as capable, might be a tour that you would do. But then even, I think these tours generally require a lot of walking to do the sightseeing. You get such a limited amount of time. You're walking a lot and fast. Yeah. Right? So you might get an hour and a half, and there's really days of stuff to see. So you're running from one location to another to snap some photos. To see.
It looks great on Instagram. Like, if you looked at my Instagram reels, you'd think that we were looking and staying in beautiful place. Admittedly, we were. But for 5 minutes.
To absorb it.
You don't get time to just sit back and, San Marco Square in Venice, because you're forfeiting time somewhere else.
And if you wanted to sit and have a drink in a piazza, you don't have that time. And because we were staying so far away, we didn't enjoy those sorts of evenings in the townships where we were staying, where you could do those sorts of things. You're back at your motel, which is just pretty basic. So, it certainly wasn't the experience I thought it would be. Yeah. It was a new experience, something we hadn't done before, probably something I wouldn't do again in a hurry.
Yeah, same. Probably not something we would do again. We've travelled a lot, so we kind of know what we like and don't like, and we tend to be the type of people that like to control our environment, and you can't do that on a bus tour. You're very much controlled by factors outside of your ability to manage. So, delays, getting lost, lots of things that are outside of your control. Even the hotels that you stay at, if it was my choice to stay at a hostel, I can accept that. But when I'm sold that I'm going to stay in a luxury hotel and I end up staying in a hostel, I feel ripped off. And that's not something that, that I choose to experience. The flights were beautiful, and I just felt that the whole accommodation was booked on lastminute.com, and I feel like I could have done better on my own. And the time that you have available to see things, you just don't have.
It's also hard to please that many people.
It is, I get that,
and again, remember the age groups that are there. So there are some people 20 years or more older than us. So the tour leader, trying to keep everyone happy, would sometimes say, okay, here's the option we have for tonight. If you want, we can stay in this town an extra hour, or if you prefer, we can head back to the hotel earlier, and we can cut the time in the town shorter and only spend, say, an hour or an hour and a half. Now, of course, we didn't want to spend less time sightseeing, so we would always say, no, we want to stay the longest. But then you'd look around other people who would say the exact opposite. They were quite happy to go to their hotel room earlier. And, if we were outvoted,
we lost out on the opportunity.
We lost out our time. And that, again, I accepted. If I was 20 or 30 years older, maybe I've had enough for the day and I'm just happy to retreat. But this is where, as a group, you are doing what the majority
wants to do. Like even so much as music. The tour guide asked us to put a list of music that you wanted to listen to on the bus.
Well, the original thing was every person puts one song.
Yeah.
Some people wrote all their favourite songs they wanted.
And some music is not your favourite music, but you have to accept it. And depending on where you were sitting on the bus, the loudness varied. So if you were sitting at the front or the middle, you would really hear the music. Whereas if you're sitting at the back...
They had controls for the front of the bus and the back of the bus, and they could adjust that volume. Where the tour leader was sitting, she was
low
at the same height as the driver, and you normally walk up the steps from where the tour leader is sitting, right next to the entrance of the bus. So she's not where the speakers are. The speakers are actually above the passengers. So she couldn't hear that it was as loud as it was. And that was a challenge because she thought it was okay. When some people would, say, "Can you turn it down?" Others are going, "No, turn it up." And so they try and turn it up or turn it. Look, we were going through Scotland, which was absolutely beautiful. It's very green, probably the greenest green I've ever seen. A field to be or mountains to be, and it's quite. You sort of want to take it in. You want to enjoy the scenery.
Maybe listen to Scottish music as background.
Just something a bit more relaxing that feels the vibe. Look, I would say sort of Australian rock, sort of pub music, loud. It sort of wasn't fitting to the mood of the scenery that we were in, and it was almost to the point some days where I was feeling like I'm getting a headache.
In fact, I was actually travelling with my sound cancelling headphones on because I just found the music too loud.
So I mean, AC/DC might be okay in a pub, but AC/DC being blared in a coach, it didn't fit what we would normally enjoy. But again, you're travelling as a group, you got to do what the majority wants. And that's where these sort of types of tours are very limiting in being customised to your own needs or wants. I think if we do a self-drive tour next time, we'd probably enjoy it more. We're the sort of people, when we travel, if we see something, we'll even do a U-turn to go back for something that caught our attention. You can't do those sorts of things.
No, you can't do it on a coach. You're on a freeway and you see a beautiful scene, some castles in the distance, a lovely town. And then the bus driver said, the tour leader said, "Okay, we're stopping in 5 minutes." And you think, well, why couldn't we stop there?
Stop at a petrol station.
Why do I have to stop at a petrol station? Sometimes for an hour and a half at a petrol station when there's like a beautiful town just there. No, it doesn't work that way. You just stop on the freeway because obviously maybe the coach can't get there. There's limits.
Well, they don't know if they can get in and out the town easily, what the roads are like, etc. But it did seem a bit ridiculous where they say, "Look, you've got an hour and a half at this petrol station stop," and then that's the hour and a half break for the driver. So, of course, he's not going to fill up petrol on his hour and a half break. He'll wait till everyone gets back on the bus, then drive to the Bowser and then fill up, and then we go. And it's like, why couldn't he have just done that? And then they said, "Okay, guys, we need an hour and 40 here." It just seems silly that sort of thing would have happened, or that he couldn't have done it, at the start of the break and they adjusted that time.
But that happened with the second coach, not with the first coach. So I don't know whether it's
by preference of
the driver or whether it was just something that maybe the second driver didn't know. So there's lots of stories that we can share. So if you'd like to know more, let us know in the comments below. Hope we answered all your questions. Thank you, Kevin. I think you're enjoying being on camera.
No. I enjoy helping you. Let's put it that way.
Oh, actually, I have to tell you a story. So I've got, I think, another 5 minutes left on this battery. Kevin had an audience, a rapt audience on the coach of women, maybe a couple of years older than me, who just loved his jokes.
My stupid bad sense of
so much so that they would actually sit next to him, even at dinner time, so they could listen to his jokes. And they actually asked the tour leader, to let him, on the last day, give a few of his, jokes. So Kevin got up on the coach and gave his best 10 jokes. So if you'd like to hear a joke, I don't think he's prepared today, It'll be in the next one, so you can get a feel for the types of jokes that the audience liked on our tour. Until next time, my friends, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and also the notification bell. The algorithm is playing funny buggers and doesn't actually let you know unless you've hit the notification bell that I've released a video, and you might miss out on riveting content like this. Thanks for watching and have a fabulous day wherever you are.
Bye.
Bye.